Hey everybody, NikoTheLegend here, also known as the well-mannered teenager, the snowflake, and the rambling idiot, and the newly added vigil. Hi, this is just a little notification here because I'm here to tell you that what you're about to see in this Niko Show episode was an interview I did with John Paul Hayward about a month or two ago, and it was already posted on YouTube, and I did not make it a Niko Show episode like I should have, and the only reason I'm saying this is because I did an interview with the great Victoria Hofferson a week ago, and I made that a Niko Show episode, so I decided to just let you guys know that I'm making it actually an official episode. So what you're about to see has been already pre-recorded, already been posted on YouTube, and on YouTube it's just called an interview with John Paul Hayward, composer across Symphonic. So I feel like I owe it to John to be fair on just making an actual Niko Show episode. This is a huge afterthought, but it hit me as soon as I did the interview with Victoria. I just wanted to be fair. So guys, I hope you do enjoy this Niko Show episode. It was a great time interviewing John Paul Hayward and learning about his origin story and all the cool things about him composing the album Cross Symphonic. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much. I've been your host, NikoTheLegend. Enjoy the Niko Show.
Hey, what's up, friend? Are you interested in lack of skill? Yeah. Or maybe some suck. I'm just a new guy for the love of game. Wait, don't go. I know it's bad. Times have changed, but not by mad. Don't you know that games are my thing? Yeah, I know it's getting real late.
Come on, look at me. I even do storytelling. Also podcasts on great game subjects. Okay, yeah, I'm not a Markiplier or a PewDiePie. But hey, that's what makes me so unique, right? Right? And hello everybody, it is I, NikoTheLegend, also known as the well-mannered teenager and the snowflake. That's not a nickname that was given to me. Actually, it was. I lied. I just tried to get away with it. I'm here with a very special guest. First time us ever talking to each other right then and now. And I'm very excited to have him on the show. This is the great John Paul Hayward. I almost said Edward. I was so close to saying Edward. I would have felt terrible. I had to stop the entire video. But welcome, good sir. It is a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we started recording, I was telling you this is my first time ever. Okay, so on YouTube, first time ever doing an interview, and in life in general, first time ever doing an interview for a musician, a composer. So it's a pretty thrilling experience. I'm eternally grateful for you being here.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? This is where you have a script, right? We were doing so good before.
I'm all for winging interviews, let me tell you.
Okay, so John, how about you let people know where they can find you on the social media and everything platforms. Let's do some quick plugins real quick.
Yeah, well, so the two main places that I do anything on is Facebook and Twitter. My handle is at John Paul Hayward. It's pretty simple, I think. And then Facebook, which I believe is John P. Hayward. And it's a musician artist page. And that's basically all I do. I mean, I have an Instagram, which is at Hayward Publishing, which is my business that I publish all my music through. I wouldn't say I'm super active, but it does exist if you're into that.
All right, awesome. And then anybody listening or watching, the links to all those pages will be down below in the description of the video. And another link that leads to the main reason why we're here. I'm really, really excited to talk about this amazing album that you created. Not to brown nose already, but we're talking about Cross Symphonic, a symphonic tribute to Chrono, which, by the way, as soon as I saw that being advertised, I think it might have been what was it? Materia Collection started. Were
Uh,
did they do the advertising for you or with you?
No, I mean that's a whole story in and of itself. But no, Materia Collective actually has no official involvement with my stuff.
Okay.
However, I do have somewhat of a history with Sebastian Wolf, who is the CEO with Materia Collective, and they very kindly helped promote the Kickstarter and some of the album stuff
Okay.
when it was first coming out back in 2019.
Oh man, and then here we are today, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, two
Um,
years later.
so I just like the rest of us, like I follow Materia Collective and Game Chops and stuff like that, and and then a few other artists that have have published their works through those
Hmm.
publishers or platforms themselves, and I just remember seeing yours pop up in the feed of I think it was Twitter, and it might have been the beginning phase, or you're doing like a Kickstarter. Maybe this is when they were trying to promote you and getting people involved.
Hmm.
And I was like, I saw what the album was, and I was like, no way, it's Chrono Cross. I was like, finally, something that's not Chrono Trigger. And like, don't get me wrong, like I love Chrono Trigger, but I'm sure you know as well as I know is that there are way too many like Chrono Trigger albums, like cover albums, symphonies. I mean, they're all great, but
Hmm.
it's so oversaturated. So when I saw that it was Chrono Cross, because I love Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger, but Chrono Cross, I guess maybe out of the two is like the black sheep in the family. So
Yeah.
so people probably don't really go for that option because like Chrono Cross isn't as popular as Chrono Trigger or something like that. That's how I saw it. But anyway,
Always blows my mind.
exactly. But anyway, so that like made my eyes widen. I was gonna say perk my ears, but you might have had a song already released, or maybe that was a little bit later. But I mean, I listened to it and I was like instantly hooked, and that's pretty much. And this was like back in the beginning, and
Yeah.
that's how I knew who you were, and I was paying attention. Like I was really paying attention because I always like seeing the journey, like from my perspective, like the audience or people waiting in line just to see, the process of it, just getting a release date, like demos coming out or sample songs, stuff like that, just to get people excited. So I like anytime like a musician that does a cover album or put their own twist on it. Like I like to be there along with for the ride. That's the most exciting part. And then when it comes out, then that's the best part. Like that's just the cherry on top. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna flat out say I'm just gonna congratulate you on getting this album out. You know,
Oh, thank you.
like
That it,
it's
this
ambitious.
album was an experience, let me tell you, and not without its rocky roads.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And before we started recording, you were kind of wanting to know, like, how I was able to like reach out to you, or like where, why, or when type deal. So this was interesting, and I don't know when it happened, like, but recently I was just like looking at my Twitter, and like I like started to go into this phase of wanting to collab with other people, that maybe YouTubers, or for example now like composers, or just content creators in general, artists. Like I
Yeah.
just now got on that phase, and like in the back of my head I was like, what about what about that guy who did that Chrono Cross album, right? Because it's been a while since I like kind of like had to think of your name. I was like, what was his name again? And I was just browsing on Twitter, and I was on my profile page, and it's just like it said John Paul Hayward follows you. I was like, oh? I was like, what? I was like, really? I'm like, okay, so this kind of motivates me even more to reach out to him, and that's kind of like the silly part of it. And then I just sent you that message, and then boom, here we are. Um,
Well, that's fantastic.
yeah, it's I just like a complete curveball. I was like, I had no idea he followed me. Maybe I did before, but we're so we're so distracted by just scrolling down or just doing like 50 other things.
To be fair, I went through a phase. I've never been a big Twitter user. Like, I did the Facebook thing for a while in college, but social media, I don't know. It's pretty polarizing and just distracting these days. But I went through a phase when I first started this album where I just mass went into Twitter and found every single person I could that was remotely interested in video game or video game music and just followed everyone. And I said, these are the people that are going to be interested in what I'm doing. So I'm going to see, who bites and who I can form connections with. So it's actually funny that you seeing me follow you is what triggered the interaction, because that's exactly what I was trying to do by following all these people, is to trigger interactions where we could talk about music and share some similar interests.
Yeah, and not trying to brag or anything, but I'm a musician myself, so it's
Oh,
cool.
yeah?
Yeah, I play the drums. Actually, whenever you see this video, there's a mini Casio keyboard, electric keyboard behind me that I started getting into piano maybe like a few months ago, and that's been pretty fun because I've been playing drums for the longest time, and I used to be in a punk rock band, at senior year in high school, and it kind of lasted until like 2015. Went into the studio, like this big time studio in Orlando, Florida, and dealt with this producer, editor, mixer guy who was like really, really into his job and really blunt with what he said. But it had to be that, no sugarcoating. But
sure.
Basically, we went in, my bandmates and I, we went in wanting to just record this set list of like 5 songs, and then at the end of the day, we came out with just one demo recorded. And
I've been there. I understand.
so we spent like $500 getting this one song perfected, and it ended up being very beautiful song. Like this guy just knew his stuff, and he did a fantastic job. And he did it all in one day. And he usually said, he told us it's like this usually takes about a week to like master this, mix it properly,
right,
volumes and all that. And I'm like, dang. But that was the last time I ever did anything like in a band and produced music like that. And then, I always sometimes I get the itch to write down a song or like hum some lyrics or something, but that's pretty much it. Now music is just a hobby.
Yeah.
So this is going to be the fun part. What was your origin story, John, on, we'll get to the origin story of doing the Chrono Cross album, but like you being a musician, have you always composed music?
Oh, man. Well, so I would have to say, I mean, I've been involved in music my whole life. Ever since I was even in preschool, we had like a preschool choir that I was a part of with my grandpa was the conductor. And then all through middle school, high school, and into college. And now I still sing in choirs professionally with the Utah Symphony up until Corona hit.
Yeah,
of course, then no one's performing now, but so I've always been in music. As far as composing, that's kind of funny because I actually in grade school I started piano around age 9, and I played that up through graduating high school, and I hated to practice. I was the least disciplined person on the planet. I hated to practice. And so, when I was supposed to be practicing, I would just diddle around and make up little melodies, chord progressions, things like that just for fun. And I would guess that that's probably where I first started composing. I didn't really write anything down until high school. I took a music theory class, an AP music theory class. And they started teaching us notation software and things that we could do on the computer. I'm like, oh, well, this is kind of cool. And, they would give us assignments where we'd have to write our own things. And so, I started diddling around there, and I had another buddy in the class with me, and we would do these things called compose-offs, where we would pick a theme and then give each other a week to just write a melody or something to encapsulate that theme. And it was all really casual. I guess it didn't really it didn't really blow up for me until college. I had my sophomore year, I was studying voice, and I had an opportunity through a church that I grew up in to do a religious album for solo voice and orchestra. And they were kind of producing this thing, and they knew that I kind of dabbled in this stuff, and I had some talent, and so they asked if I wanted to be a part of it. And I ended up arranging these and taking them to a conductor of mine in college who was also an incredible composer and arranger, and just asking him for some feedback. And he looked at my stuff and he's like, well, I assume you're here because you want some feedback. You don't want me to just tell you good job and send you on your way. I said, yeah, no, be critical. Tell me what you got. And he tore it to pieces. Like there was more red pen on the paper than there were notes.
Yeah.
And then he hands it back to me. He says, it's good for pop music. And he says, follow these notes and we'll make it actually good.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And so, for a lot of people, I think that he assumed that I would take that and, just kind of be like, whatever, what does this guy know? And move on with my life.
Nope.
And I went home that night and I completely rewrote the arrangement, like from scratch.
Dang.
And took it back to him the next day, and it completely like knocked his socks off that I would put that kind of effort to it and turn it around in one day. And from there, that kind of showed me that I had an interest in things. And of course, he became very interested in what I was doing and ended up mentoring me for the next 4 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Which really jump-started things. And then about a year after I did that project with my church, I had another buddy that was going into film in college, and he was doing a short film as his senior project. And he asked me if I wanted to score his film. And so I moved into his house for a couple days. I took my computer and everything, and so that we could be working together while he's editing. And I scored his little 15-minute film, which I actually think is still on my YouTube channel. It's a little embarrassing, but yeah. From there, I decided, well, hey, maybe I don't want to be a performer. I actually really enjoy writing music, and so I would say that really long-winded story is my origin story for composing.
Wow. But I like the best part is when you didn't give up after, your mentor, like you said, tore it to pieces. And then that kind of, it broke you down, but then it built you back up and wanted to try even harder. That was a good...
For sure. That
was a good fighting spirit.
There's a lot of rocks in this business that you have to overcome. There's a lot of things that are just going to knock you flat. And I think it's those of us that never give up that eventually, make it through the I don't even know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you have to get beaten down very hard.
But you have to keep getting back up. Otherwise, you're never going to make it in the business. And it's like the same mentor, because he was the chair of the choral department at the University of Utah, and the same mentor actually got up in class one day, and somebody had asked him, how do you succeed in music? What would you recommend? And he said, what would I recommend? He says, I would recommend that all of you get out of music and get a real job. And of course, after everybody laughed, he clarifies and he goes, music is incredibly hard. Most people don't make it in music, and it's a huge struggle. And I only advise people to stick with music if you absolutely can't live without music in your life. Otherwise, find something else you're passionate about and go be successful. And I think that's really great advice. And for me, it rung true because all my life, I've had other interests, casual interests, and I'm decent at a few things, but nothing has really stuck with me like music. Music is a part of who I am, and it's something that I physically need to survive. If I go a couple months or something without interacting with music or doing something, I get really restless and I get really irritable. And so this is just a type of outlet for me that, I can't imagine myself doing anything else in life.
Well, music is a part of you, it's a part of your character. It's like the extension of who you are, It's like,
yeah.
Music is like the sword and you're the knight type deal, It's like
Yeah.
it's been with you for so long and everything. And you know, you don't want to let music down. You don't want to let yourself down. And then it's just been in your family. You know, like you said, your granddad was a conductor, right?
Yeah, well, he taught high school orchestra and choir for however many years, and then he was also a concert pianist for a while in his younger years. And he was my piano teacher up until the end of high school.
So I mean, there you go. It's just passing along the torch, which is always great.
Yeah,
That's awesome. And so yeah, that entire story was great. I appreciate you telling me that. That's awesome.
yeah, for sure. I mean,
Um,
like Simon and Garfunkel say, "Hello, darkness, my old friend," and that's
yeah,
what music feels like sometimes.
yeah. I mean, you're not wrong though. I mean, art in general is so competitive, and nowadays it's so easy to just I'm just in general to make something and post it somewhere.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
it's just
Well, and
so
this
available these
the
days.
skill level required to make art, music, film, any of that is nothing like it used to be. And that's not to say that people aren't good anymore. It's
Yeah.
just to say the bar to entry now is so much lower than it used to be that literally anybody can come in.
Yeah,
Um,
it's that you
and,
turn into quantity over quality pretty much.
yeah, well, but and technology has made it so easy to produce good sounding, good looking, products
Mm.
that it's become so hyper competitive. I mean, I don't know how anybody survives. I honestly.
It's yeah, it's like winning the lottery almost, and that's
Yeah.
and that's with like all forms of media and art. Books or writing books or being an author, musician, a painter,
Yep.
a content creator like on YouTube or a streamer on Twitch. Just all that stuff is just it just becomes instantly oversaturated. Um,
Yeah.
but like you were saying, you just got to keep plugging along, and then one of these days, you'll get that breakthrough, and someone out there that's someone's finally paying attention. That's like this big time person. It could be a sponsor or another musician who's big but likes your sound and stuff. Gave you a shot. Like stuff like
Yeah.
that. Um, and honestly, networking is like the key to doing this to survive because
For sure.
the whole sharing is caring thing. It really makes a difference,
Yeah.
and that's how I see it. Like, especially on YouTube or streaming. I wrote a book last year, and I still have yet to publish it because for financial reasons, I can't do it yet, and there's a bunch of hoops I got to go through,
Hmm.
and
For sure.
but I know deep down when I bring that out to the public, it's gonna be a pain in the ass to just get it anywhere for someone to be like, oh,
Yeah.
what's
No,
that?
you're absolutely right.
What's that? The hero's journey? Ha! Been there, done that. I'll just watch Star Wars or something. So
No, I mean it's funny that you say that because I mean that's totally how it is for everybody, and the you can struggle as a musician for years, constantly putting out things, constantly writing music, recording your own stuff out of pocket, and never make it anywhere. And ultimately, I think never giving up is important, but it's also important to find ways to be okay if you never make it big. Like I know a few people that it really destroyed them when they gave music their all for 10 years and it just never went anywhere, and they
yeah.
it just destroyed their being, and they had to switch to something else. And there's always kind of that I wonder what could have happened. So
Well, that's the thing is that a lot of people, they it depends on each person, of course, but a lot of times people expect to make it through that time that they're putting everything in, and like everybody gets that feeling, like, man, I put so much work into this. How come no one's paying attention? And
I can relate.
so the saying goes like a pot never boils when you're looking at it, right?
Yep.
It's when you're
Yep.
like least expect it, and you get some guy named NikoTheLegend that reaches out to this wonderful musician named John, and then boom, here we are, right? So it's like
I I have high expectations of making it big after this interview. By the way.
Yeah, perfect. So I'll just
Don't
call,
let me down.
I'll just call a couple. You'll get a few knocks on the door. If they knock 4 times, just don't answer. It's not a friend of mine.
Got it. I'll keep that in mind.
but seriously though, it's by who you know, and this partnership you have to make, this networking, and just eventually it just branches out, and you just sometimes they'll come to you, other times you'll have to go to them to really get your foot in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't have to physically do that. Like sometimes your work will do the talking for you, and there's been plenty of I'll just say writers, because that's the thing that comes to my head, that or artists that have gotten famous, like not to go grim, but after they died, like H.P. Lovecraft, for example. H.P. Lovecraft, he was a pretty much a bum, poor guy living in the slums, who had I think he had colon cancer or something. So the guy was a mess for the most part, but his stuff got really popular when he was gone, and someone decided to really make it big, someone to uncover it. So sometimes it's like that. It takes a long time, and I always go with the thing, there's a time and place for everything, as cliche as that sounds, and it also happens when you least expect it.
Well, and I think it's important too to really ask yourself why you're doing what you're doing. I think if the end goal is to get famous, I mean that works for some people, but ultimately, I think most musicians can relate when I say that's not what's important. I don't think most of us really care about fame as much as we care about reaching people.
Just doing it.
And at least I guess maybe I should only speak for myself, but for me, being able to share the music, being able to speak to somebody on this ethereal level, that it really transcends language. I mean, music is such a powerful emotive tool. It's really cool to use it, especially in a storytelling type of way. Mm-hmm. And I would say that's probably the biggest strength of my music is I really focus, and I'm really able to paint very vivid pictures, very vivid scenes, and really tell a story. And it's so cool for me to send that out to people and to get feedback from people about how they received it, what it meant to them, or even better, to watch people experience it and see where it takes them. For me that's better than being famous. Not to say that a big fat paycheck at the end of the month wouldn't be awesome.
Yeah, that's the bonus.
I don't think any of us would turn it down, but
No.
That's not the goal, and that was never the goal with Cross Symphonic either.
Yeah, so we can actually segue into that, but before that, there are 2 types of people in the industry. There's people that do it for the money, and the one that do it for the love. And
Yep.
I always tell people, if my stuff, let's just say I never get my book published, my YouTube channel never gets, sets off, gets super popular, or whatever you want to call it. Being popular is subjective, but
Yeah.
as long as I did it, it's like I'll always have this book being done. It's like my legacy. It can be passed on. It can live. It can stand the test of time. It's not going anywhere. So, like people pass on like legacy through like having a family, having kids, and they live the next part of your life, through them.
Sure.
Doing music, writing stories, movies and stuff, that stuff will last forever. And that's what's so amazing about it. I always recommend people, I'm like, hey, write a story, write a book. Like, I think everybody should write a book of some kind. It doesn't have to be long or short, just whatever, like a story.
Yeah.
And it could be on anything, because it'd be nice to know what goes on in that head of yours. But obviously you can apply that imagination, creativity to, like how you did with music, or someone does with, painting pictures and so on, movies, so on and so forth.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like everybody has that kind of story, that creative story that they can put into whatever, how do I say, concrete sculpture of some kind. I try to think of the proper thing to sing there.
No, I get you.
So everybody's got that ability. It's just the sad part is always when they neglect that part of their brain and their imagination, because it's there. It's there just waiting to be tapped into, you know, and then it just takes you on this entirely different plateau, this whole new universe that you never knew existed. And you're like,
well, not to be that guy that I always hated in high school that had to come and preach about the arts.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe this is just a thing that comes with age, but you realize how important the arts are to us as human beings. I mean, there are several studies that draw correlations to like music and higher test scores, and you know,
yeah,
I'm sure it exists with visual arts as well. I'm just not as, you know, privy to that area of the world. But
yeah,
it's so important for us to, even if it's not something that you want to do professionally or even something that you aren't all that interested in, just exploring that avenue of humanity and exploring that area of the brain has so many benefits to us as people. I think it's a really important part of every person's development. So again, not to be that guy that always drove me crazy when he had to come and give the speech about how important the arts are in school, but really the arts are super important in school.
Yeah, art is your history, and history always has many stories to tell, and that's what shapes us today. You know, a picture means 1,000 words. You know, it has that much of an impact. And that's why people get attached to stuff like this. Speaking of attachment, and we're going to talk about Cross Symphonic now. This is going to be the juicy part. This is the part where I am most excited about, because this is a fantastic rendition or orchestration, symphonic tribute to one of my favorite games, especially JRPGs or RPGs of all time. I'm going to go extra nerd mode here, and just music soundtracks in general. Like, I love Yashinori Mitsuda. Gosh, 1 out of 10 on preparation. But he is like, in the gaming world and just music in music world itself, he's one of my favorite composers of all time. Like, he's fantastic. So
yeah,
when I heard your album, like, I knew right away that you really cared about his work. You took your time. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe this is like you did it like overnight or something. But from my perspective and from me listening, you treaded carefully not to, let's just say, butcher the legacy in some way. You know, I
appreciate that.
This was this was a game that, which obviously we'll get to in a moment, that really meant something to you. What this guy did for you, you know, probably growing up, this is probably something you heard, and it just, boom, you made this album to show the appreciation of this game, this soundtrack, this composer that you look up to, and I see it, I hear it, I feel it. That's what you want. You want people to feel the music. That's the whole point of making music, is people feel it, and that's how I felt when listening to your stuff. Like, you did a great job. More brown nosing, but you did a great job, you know, retaining that connection that people got when playing Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. You know, the soundtracks in those games are just masterful. So this is a nice rendition extension type deal. So here's the big question: how did you even get to making Cross Symphonic? What's like the 101 of this album?
Well, that's a hold on, sorry, someone just walked in.
That's okay. Is that Mitsuda? Mitsuda, I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
So you'll just have to edit that out for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so just for memory's sake, will you rephrase the question again?
Sure. So how did we get to making Cross Symphonic? Like, what was the origin story of that, and what just, you know, the inspiration behind it? Pretty much the 101 of it all.
Oh, well, I mean, that's quite the question to unpack. And it's got a bit of a history to it.
Sounds good.
Well, like basically every musician that has ever enjoyed video game music. Mitsuda and Nobuo Uematsu are two of my biggest inspirations.
I don't blame you. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and so I grew up playing Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger, especially during my my elementary days. And I've always had a really strong connection to Mitsuda and his music. I feel like he's a really honest composer. He writes music that really speaks to people, and I don't mean to downplay his music. It's kind of more. I gotta stop and reword this.
That's okay.
Before I dig a hole.
Remember, if you hear
his
four
music...
knocks on your door, it's over.
Yeah, that's right. And I know it's him coming for me. No, he's a really fantastic composer, and I know that he's spoken about being more of a minimalist composer. Mm-hmm. He tends to like to use as little compositional technique and instrumentation as possible to still convey his point effectively, mm-hmm. which is a real art form in and of itself.
Yeah.
But I've always felt like Mitsuda's music is really honest and pure and raw. It's not overthought. It's not overproduced. Mm-hmm. And that aspect of it has always really spoken to me. It lends itself to really strong melody writing, which was always really memorable for me as a listener. And it's something that I would always sit and play with, specifically Chrono Trigger. I would sit and play with and listen to a lot as a kid. Mm-hmm. To the point where, I don't know, I'm sure you said you're a huge fan, so I'm sure you're familiar with Chrono Trigger, but when you get to the end of time and you have all the different characters, if you talk to them to join your party, it'll play their character theme. Mm-hmm. And I used to sit there as a kid, and take an old cassette player, which I'm showing my age here, and I would record each character theme so I could listen to it later by myself without playing the game. So I have a huge history with Chrono music, and growing up, I was always really interested in orchestral renditions of video game music. And around that time, things were starting to get kind of big with Final Fantasy. They were doing their concerts in Japan in the late '90s, early 2000s, where they were orchestrating some of Nobuo Uematsu's work.
Yeah.
That stuff was always really exciting to me. I always loved it. I would search it out on iTunes for hours, just trying to find rips of it on YouTube, just somewhere where I could listen to it. And then the Distant Worlds albums started coming out, which were really kind of like the big symphonic treatment for Final Fantasy, the first like big orchestral album. And that got me really pumped that, maybe we're going to get a really, banging Chrono Trigger album here in a couple of years. And I waited and waited and waited, and it never came out, and it never happened. And so, I kind of dismissed it. Well, I had started playing Chrono Cross in like early high school, as it was kind of my transition into PlayStation RPGs. It was one of the few, and I instantly fell in love with that game. And like you, it probably holds an edge over Chrono Trigger for me in terms of just being one of my favorite games of all time. Yeah. I feel like the storytelling, the setting, the music, all of it is Chrono Trigger, but level 11. It's just one step above. I instantly fell in love with the game, and I played it up until my mom walked in on me once, and she saw that the characters were swearing and whatever, and that was new in video games, and it was a big deal to my mom. She's like, "Oh, I don't want you to play that anymore." Yeah. So
that's funny.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But anyway, so I rediscovered Chrono Cross again in college when I was like, "Oh, that game I used to play? I really liked that. It was Chrono Cross. I should play that again." And I don't know if there were literal tears, but there were definitely emotional tears by the end of that game. The story completely captivated me. The music is incredible. The characters, the setting, all of it. And it quickly became one of my favorite games. And I said, it's almost criminal that Square has not done anything with this music.
I'm with you on that.
And so I thought to myself, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm in a place compositionally. I don't feel like I'm a good enough composer yet to take this on. But one day I'm going to do a Chrono Cross album or a Chrono. I think it was originally a Chrono Trigger album. Mm-hmm. And then, fast forward a couple years, the Final Symphony albums came out, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Final Symphony album. It's
I haven't
produced
heard of it
by. It's produced by a German group. It's incredible. Honestly, it's an incredible piece of music. They have a symphonic poem on there called "Born with a Gift of Magic." It's a symphonic suite from Final Fantasy VI, and it's seriously one of the coolest pieces of music I've ever heard in my life. You should go check that out. Anyway, that whole thing really jump-started me. I said, you know what? That was awesome. I think it's time. I think now is the time I'm going to start working on my Chrono album. And that was probably, I don't know, 2017 or so. Mm-hmm. No, sorry, it would have been like 2015. Anyway, I started kind of messing around with some things. I had heard Blake Robinson, he's another VGM guy in England, that he had just done the entire Chrono Trigger soundtrack with orchestral samples, giving it his own orchestral treatment, every single track. And I'm like, that's a really cool idea. I'm going to do something like that with Chrono Cross. Everyone's done Chrono Trigger. There's, like you said, umpteen million cover albums out there. So I'm going to do Chrono Cross, because if you search Chrono Cross, there's like 2. and none of them are orchestral. They're like people's piano covers, which are fine, but I'm looking for the symphony.
Yeah, it's a crime.
And so I wrote 3 tracks or so that never actually got released, where I just took, the first track in the soundtrack and orchestrated it, and the second track orchestrated it, etc. And then between listening to Final Symphony and getting inspired by another VGM artist named Sam Dillard, who I ran across the same year, he had released a Chrono Trigger album where he had kind of turned it into a film score, and I went, holy crap, that's a cool idea. And so I'm like, maybe I can meet that somewhere in the middle. Maybe I can take the classical music that I've been studying, that I've been learning to create, and the classical world that I've worked in, and I can merge that with this film score idea and create essentially a soundtrack for a Chrono Cross movie that doesn't exist. And that's really the beginning of Cross Symphonic. From that point on, I went ahead and just scrapped the 3 tracks that I had already written and started over. And this wasn't till, I don't know, late 2017, early 2018 when I really started working on this. And I think I got 3 or 4 tracks in when I finally started realizing, well, I would like to release this just on Spotify, iTunes, and all these things so that people can listen to this. What does that entail? And that's when I started digging into the world of licensing and all of that jazz, and ran across Materia Collective for the first time. And I reached out to them asking just some general questions about licensing, and I sent them a couple of my mock-ups, and just asking for some general feedback. And they wrote back and were very interested in the album in general, and they're kind of like, well, hey, what if you recorded this with an orchestra? And I'm just like, I could never do that. They're like, it's not as hard as you think. People like this stuff. They would fund it. We should do a Kickstarter. And I said, that's a great idea. And we, Materia Collective and I, communicated for several months after that, and ultimately we decided that a partnership was probably not the best relationship at this point, and I decided to go at it alone. But from that point on, I had been casually writing, a little bit on the weekends, kind of every night after work, things like that, slowly pumping out tracks. And then it wasn't until the end of 2018 that I was like, all right, well, I've got to get this done. And I started dedicating full time to it. And the majority of the album was probably written in 3 months or so.
Wow. And you're talking about like all the sheet music and stuff, right? And
yeah. So I am more of a traditional composer. I know a lot of people compose inside their DAW, their digital audio workstation. Their programs, Cubase, Sonar, Reaper, whatever. I was never in that space. I learned in Finale, which if you don't know what that is, it's a music notation program. It's for actual sheet music. Mm-hmm. That's where I was comfortable, and so I spent a lot of time figuring out how to pair professional grade virtual samples with Finale's sheet music notation, so that I could write in traditional notation and have, Hollywood style mock-ups play when I was finished. And I've come up with a really great system that allows me to do that, and it's probably a little bit longer than if I were just to write inside my DAW, but ultimately it cuts out a step if you ever plan to take this to a live orchestra, because the sheet music's already done. Mm-hmm. Which was the plan with Cross Symphonic. So I got it written. We launched a Kickstarter, or I should say I launched a Kickstarter, and immediately found out that I had not done my due diligence with the licensing, as I got a personal message from Yasunori Mitsuda himself on Twitter saying, "Excuse me, you haven't licensed this." I mean, in so many words. And I immediately realized what was going on, because I had every intention of licensing it. I had put it out there that I was going to license it. I had explored and found the avenues I needed to go down, and I had crossed all my T's except for the one where I actually had reached out to Septimile, who is Yasunori Mitsuda's publishing company that holds the rights to Chrono, and informed them that I was going to be doing this. And so I had not received permission to go ahead with my project, and I got a personal email or a personal Twitter message from Mitsuda asking me to please contact his company and explain what is going on. And so at that point, I immediately shut down the Kickstarter, and I contacted Septimile, and they were extremely gracious with me, extremely understanding, wonderful people. I feel like I got extremely lucky. They listened to a few of my mock-ups, and they sent them to Mitsuda, and they sent back an approval and said, this sounds fun, go at it.
Wow, that's cool.
It was really cool, but it was also a lot of no sleeping for a few days and just constant dread that there was going to be a lawsuit in my mailbox the next day.
That 4 knocks, man. The 4 knocks are coming.
That's right. And so, so once I got approval, it was pretty obvious that I didn't have the audience to meet the goals, the funding goals that I was asking for in the original Kickstarter, because I had really, once I wrote this thing, I had really latched onto the idea that this could be really cool if I wrote it in more of a classical film score type of way, kind of like John Williams, who's another huge inspiration for me. Yeah. And so when I was writing this, I was really trying to marry together Mitsuda and John Williams music. And so, but what comes with John Williams music is massive orchestras. We're talking like 90 players on a stage.
Yeah.
And that's what I had budgeted for, and that's what I really, really wanted for this project. And ultimately, after I had to cancel the first Kickstarter, I mean, the writing was on the wall. It wasn't going to happen. not with the exposure that I had, which is basically nothing. I mean, I was a newbie coming onto the scene from nowhere. I'm lucky anybody gave me any attention at all.
Right here.
And so, yeah, that's right. And so I restructured and I came up with a way to get this recorded. I talked with a couple family members and friends, and we restructured and came up with this idea to launch a tiered Kickstarter system where if we met the minimum funding goal, we would record live string players, and then we would just do virtual instruments for everything else. And then if we met the next funding goal, we would add woodwinds or brass, and then et cetera, until the full orchestra was being recorded.
Yeah.
And so by the time the Kickstarter ended, we had reached the minimum funding goal to do live strings and live woodwinds.
Oh, okay.
And we had not quite reached brass. And I was like, all right, whatever. This is cool still. We can get it done. I feel like my brass samples are pretty good. Mm-hmm. And I got a message from John Robert Matz, who's a part of the Game Brass.
Okay.
He'd also supported the Kickstarter and followed the project a little bit, and he had been looking at the updates, I was scheduling the recording sessions in Los Angeles for the orchestra, and he says, "You can't use MIDI brass." And I said, "Well, I agree, but I mean, this is what I've got." And he says, "No, I am a part of a group. Let me help you." I mean, I'm paraphrasing here.
Right.
And he sent me a few examples, and he's like, "We can record this, without blowing the budget."
Wow.
And I was skeptical, and they sent me their stuff, and I listened to it, and I went, "Oh wow, they're actually really good."
Yeah.
And we ended up signing an agreement, and they recorded the brass remotely after the fact for Cross Symphonic, and it absolutely transformed the music. I mean,
wow.
I don't think the album would have been anywhere near what it was without them. And so, of course, after that point, I'm like, well, I can't use a fake choir, and so I sunk a good chunk of my own money into the project at that point, and called in every favor I possibly could from everyone that I've sung with since the end of time.
Yeah.
And we put together a choir in Salt Lake City and recorded that for the album. And let me tell you that it's an A-list group of singers that appeared on that.
Dude, that's freaking awesome. I'm still back at the part of the story where Masuda sent you a message on Twitter.
So it's cool and really depressing at the same time because he's a childhood hero. He's been an inspiration for me forever. I love his music. I would say he's probably the composer that has shaped me and my passion for music more than any other composer that I can think of.
Yeah. With
the exception of maybe John Williams. But so getting a message from him was incredibly cool because I'm like, this is the man, this is the myth, the legend himself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the message was, "Hey, dude, you're stepping all over my toes. What's up?"
But see,
I'm like,
but see, John, that's sometimes what it takes, man. I know
that
you
is
were
not the
right.
That is not the message I ever wanted to get from him. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I did not want my first interaction to be, "Are you trying to screw me, bro?"
Yeah, exactly. But see, now he'll always remember you, whether it be good or bad. Like any press, any press is good press. That's how I see it. So
I don't know if that's true, but no. Regardless, he was incredibly gracious. I mean, obviously, there's a huge language barrier. As I tried to explain myself to him over Twitter, he was very gracious and gave me contact to the president of Septim LA, which I probably never could have gotten myself.
Yeah, that's
so it worked out.
Yeah,
it worked out. It was a huge boost, and they were really gracious and understanding. I explained myself to them, and they said, "Okay, I think we understand. Let me talk to Mitsuda and get back to you." And from there, it was a really productive relationship because the way I wrote Cross Symphonic, I mean, if you listen to it, you'll notice in each track there are several different themes.
Yeah.
And they all kind of play together. So it's not like track one represents just one track from the album. I mean, I think track one on Cross Symphonic has 7 or 8 themes from Chrono Cross in it. Mm-hmm. Well, in the world of licensing, that's a nightmare, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And not only is it a nightmare, it's incredibly expensive. I mean, once you start getting that many themes onto a track, you're almost paying more in royalties than it's even possible to make if you were keeping 100% of the profit.
Yeah.
So they were extremely gracious with me and willing to work with me to make it manageable and to get it out the door. And moving forward, I mean, there are plenty of other games that I want to give the same type of treatment to, but I mean, moving forward without that kind of relationship and someone willing to help me make it work, Cross Symphonic will probably remain something really special in my catalog just because I don't have those connections to companies like Square Enix.
Well, this is your first album you ever released, right?
Actually, it's my third studio album, but it's my first video game album.
So you always remember your first video game album, or just this type of, path you took to get this out. First video game album, so it will always hold a special place in your heart. And
For sure.
you definitely...
Well, and it's Chrono Cross, which is
Yeah.
one of my favorite games and soundtracks of all time. So
Exactly. And, it was a crash course for you pretty much in this kind of, project you were doing. So there was, the good thing is you survived, you got it out the door, and, me and many others are enjoying it heavily. It's great. It's a good...
the fan response has been incredible. I remember when I first released it, there was a lot of uncertainties on how it would be received, because some of the themes in there are extremely different from the game, like the Frozen Flame, for example, which I represented in the track battle for the Frozen Flame, is like the exact opposite interpretation of how Mitsuda wrote it. And so
it's deconstructed.
So I never knew how those type of things were going to be received, because I know that this is a pretty sacred soundtrack to a lot of people. And I wasn't here to reinvent the wheel.
No.
I'm not trying to improve on what I already consider to be one of the best soundtracks ever. I'm simply trying to reinterpret it into something different.
Yeah. You were putting your own
and-
spin on it, Your own...
Right. Well, and this whole project was a huge passion project for me. I mean, when I first pitched it with Materia Collective and I was first talking about it with family and friends, I was very clear about my vision. This project was to pay tribute to a game that meant a lot to me as a person, and to really just send a love letter out into the universe to show how important this music is to me, how much I love it, how much it means, and everything else. So it was never really about success, popularity. All of those things would be nice, but it was always about just putting the music out there and letting it exist in an area that I feel like has been extremely neglected.
Yeah, and it was it's just out of respect, You're paying.
So
you're paying tribute.
yeah, and so the fan response, and I had some people at the Chrono Compendium, which is a website dedicated to just Chrono stuff. They latched onto this project and were cheering me on from the sidelines for a good 6 months before the album was released. I honestly don't know that I would have finished it without them, because you get to the end of something like that and it just feels like it doesn't matter anymore, and you're tired, and deadlines and whatever, life happens. Without knowing that there were others out there like me who just wanted to see the music out there and to see something new and exciting exist around this IP, I'm not sure that it ever would have gotten done. So, I mean, their support and other support means a whole lot.
Yeah,
and like I mentioned to you on one of our previous conversations before, while we were setting up this interview, ironically, Square Enix released a Chrono Trigger / Chrono Cross album like a month before Cross Symphonic came out.
Of course. They finally care.
I was gonna say, after all of this time and all of this fretting and waiting and hoping and wanting, I finally go through the motions to do it myself, and then a month before I finish, they surprise drop this great Chrono Cross Chrono Trigger orchestral box set, and I just went, oh well, I mean, I hope there's space in the universe for both of these.
I made a video just talking all about, like, when Chrono Trigger turned 25 and they didn't do anything. There was no, like, celebration. There was no, like, yeah, happy birthday, Chrono Trigger, or this and that.
Yeah.
They did nothing. And did nothing. Chrono Cross is definitely the biggest sin, because they haven't been doing anything with that game since it released back on the PlayStation 1.
So well, and that's where some of my stress came from too, because 2019 was the 20th anniversary of Chrono Cross's release in the United States, and that was a milestone I really wanted to hit with this album. Like, the timing was perfect. It wasn't even intentional. It just happened.
Life's interesting that way, huh?
Yeah. It just happened that way, and so I'm like, well, I have to hit that November date. I've got to hit that release date. It's perfect. It's like the universe set it up for me, and that caused its own amount of stress. just because. And I mean, of course, the project is still not quite finished. If you followed it at all, you'll know that the vinyl has been going through vinyl development hell and is still not finished as of yet. But that is still a process.
It'll get there, man. It'll happen when it chooses to, right?
It's certainly not for lack of trying, but the good news is I think we're finally about there.
Awesome. Well, best of luck to you on that, man. That's going to be another big step with this whole thing, getting it out there a lot more.
Yeah, there have been a lot of really patient and understanding people waiting for this that will be absolutely thrilled to get it, and I hope that I can deliver. I've done everything within my power, but vinyl is a new frontier for me, and it's been a learning experience for sure.
Yeah. It's been an experience for all of us. I'm sure I speak for the people that have, pre-ordered the vinyl, buy your music, listen to it. We're all just extremely proud, man.
I appreciate it.
So, couple closing things I wanted to ask you before we finish up here. Sure. I just want to say, before I ask that, I'm completely with you on Mitsuda's music, and we don't have to go so far into this, but it's kind of like an add-on when you were talking about his music meaning a lot to you. I'm with you on that. He's the main reason why people got so attached to those games. There's this
100%.
There's this some kind of journey you always go on with just his music. His music creates its own world, and it so happens that the game does a good job representing that. And it's so innocent. When you listen to his music, it's very innocent. It soothes the soul, whether it be something heavy, boss battle music, or just traveling from town to town and the overworld and stuff. And
well, and that's the purity that I was talking about too. I think that you're talking about you're picking up on the same thing. Yeah. It just has a purity to it, a raw honesty, which is just so unique to him.
There's a lot of love behind it, and poor guy Mitsuda, he got 2 stomach ulcers from working on Xenogears and Chrono Trigger, and then Uematsu had to take over. It's just this guy was stressing really hard too back in the day with Chrono Trigger and Xenogears. It's so, you guys have that connection when it comes to stress levels, deadlines, and stuff, and maybe stress.
Well, I never developed any ulcers. I think that he definitely had the worst end of the stick on that one.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is that you guys, he probably understood where you were coming from when. You got everything worked out with him and stuff. I'm sure he felt honored because I always feel, a normal person would feel flattered if something was made in their honor and stuff, especially, when it comes to Chrono Cross and stuff. So.
Well, I certainly hope so. And I had the opportunity to send him a copy of the CD when it was all finished.
Any response? Are we waiting still?
No, I didn't hear anything. I was really hoping that it, by some miracle, it would really move him and he would write me a personal thank you. But, that's dreams and wishes. in the world, in reality, I'm sure he listened to it, and I really hope he enjoyed it. But he's a busy guy. He's got deadlines of his own and things to do.
Yeah.
So
that's all.
But it is really cool knowing that I was able to send him a copy, and I like to imagine that it's sitting in his collection somewhere.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so last 2 things. First question's, well, it might be a difficult one, but I think the last one's going to be pretty difficult. But the first one, your favorite song on the album that you felt that you loved the most. This is tough. This is like picking your favorite son or daughter, right? It's like
Well, I mean, there are days where it feels like they're the stepchildren, the ones that you you put under the cupboard like Harry Potter. But, no, I'm just kidding. That's a tough one. there are things that I really love about several songs, but I would have to say, oh, not to be cliche, it's probably a toss-up between Radical Dreamers or Scars of Time.
Oh, dude, I was gonna tell you one of my favorite songs on the album is Radical Dreamers.
Yeah, that one to me is probably the most emotional piece of music on the album.
Oh,
and
for sure.
And Marie that did the vocals for that just absolutely nailed it. And when she sent in her recording the first time, I mean, it was just constant chills.
And this is someone that you know, right? Personally?
No, actually, I had not known her at all before this project. And,
that's awesome.
So I had an idea. I had an idea of who I wanted to sing this part. I had an idea of the voice that I wanted to sing this part. And so I scoured YouTube, and I sent my brother on YouTube hunts because he's big into like the indie world on YouTube.
Yeah.
Just to find all these different, as many people with this voice type as he could find, and then he sent them to me, and I went and did my own research, and we ran across this YouTube channel, and I think it's MREE, and she goes by Marie, I believe. Mm-hmm. And she had this Kingdom Hearts cover, and I was like, that's it, that's the voice, that's perfect. Yeah. And so I wrote her out of the blue. She lives up in Oregon, I think.
Yeah.
And I found her contact page on her website, and I just sent an email out of the blue. It's like, hey, I'm doing this album. I really love your voice. Would love to have you sing. And totally just like, this is a long shot. And she responded to me in like 5 hours and is like, oh, I'm interested. Send me some details. And from there, I mean, the rest is history. But yeah, I had not known her at all before this project.
That's cool, man. Yeah, that's Radical Dreamers is fantastic. Like, I can understand why you like. I love it when there's like a couple songs out of albums or like covers or that have just like someone singing like that the entire time. It's just very emotional, like you were saying. So awesome, good.
Well, and
good find.
She nailed it. And it is just an incredibly emotional track, I think. And it, honestly, not to toot my own horn, but I think the arrangement is just stellar. And that's more tribute to Mitsuda than anything for writing the music. I think. I don't even know where the arrangement came from. Honestly, I just wrote it, and it was luck, I guess. Because I got done and I listened to it, and I went, "This is such an incredible piece of music." And I'm not just talking about the arrangement; I'm just talking about the piece of music in general. And Marie really took it and brought it to life from that point.
Yeah, I think that's great.
And then For Scars of Time, the reason why it's a toss-up is because that song is so iconic, and I don't know that there's a better adventure song, in my opinion, out there than Scars of Time.
No. Oh my gosh! Like in Chrono Cross, when you're running around out like in the overworld or on your boat, I'm like, man.
Yeah.
How did
I had?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I had a couple of people ask me why it's the last song on the album, because Scars of Time is the first thing you hear when you start Chrono Cross, when you put in the PlayStation disc.
Yeah. And
ultimately, it's because the goal of this album was to tell a story. So I wrote each piece to try and follow the story loosely from the game, clear up until the end. And Scars of Time to me felt like the perfect closer. It's like at the end of Star Wars when bam, the title pops on the screen and they play the title theme all over again.
Yeah.
That was my Scars of Time moment.
Oh, that's pretty
and
cool.
And I thought it was really effective personally, but I don't know. I still have a lot of people be like, I don't know, it should be the first track.
I mean, if people remember, you're opening a book in Chrono Cross, right? And then eventually it's got to close, so maybe you saw it like that. But that's great, man. I mean, they're all great songs, but yeah, Radical Dreamers is one of my favorite. Okay.
Yeah. Well. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I was going to ask you the last question.
I was just going to do a couple of shout outs for other tracks that deserve.
Sure. By all means.
That deserve. Maybe not the favorite title, but they're some of my favorites. And track number 3, I think, is where Cross Symphonic. It's called A Theft for a Life. I think that's where my focus really narrowed on, and the conceptual idea for the album really came into focus. The Hermit and the Dragon is a fun one, which again was another turning point in the album for me in terms of the writing and where it was going. I also really like Where Time Stands Still. That one has A lot of really poignant moments, I think, and some of my favorite string writing on the album. And then, of course, the next three tracks are fantastic as well. Battle for the Frozen Flame, The Orphan Dreamer, and Duel with the Dragon God, I thought were all a lot of fun. Actually, Duel of the Dragon God won Best Orchestral Cover at the MagFest, I think.
Really?
Awards. Yeah, it was nominated as Best Orchestral Cover, and it won Best Orchestral Cover in 2019.
Dang, GG, man, that's great.
Yeah, it was a really cool moment, and I actually couldn't attend just because of some personal things, but John Robert Matz happened to be there, and he accepted that on my behalf.
That's awesome.
So, I just listed like half of the album, and the other half is good too. So, I guess just go listen to it if you haven't, and you be sure to drop me a line and let me know what you think of everything.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Yeah, I appreciate the honesty. I always like hearing, the artist side of things on like what they like too. Final question. This might be an open-ended one, but maybe we could summarize it real quick. Deep down, I hate to put you on the spot even more. Are you happy and proud of this album that you released it? Are you satisfied with your work? That's such a open-ended question, but and this isn't like a way to like burn your bridges or anything. You're like, nah, I effing hate it,
No. I understand. Well, there's a twofold answer to that one. Yes, I am very happy that this album is out there, that it's done, that it's something I did. In fact, it's led to numerous opportunities in the past 2 years that I never would have run across had I not gone through, the process of making Cross Symphonic. And so, regardless of how Cross Symphonic was received or how well it did, it was an incredible experience, and it's one that I would do again. That being said, the second part of your question was, am I happy with my work? Well, that's a loaded question because is any artist truly happy with their work?
Yep, it's very.
So, don't get me wrong. Cross Symphonic was a huge moment of growth for me, both as a businessman and a composer.
Yeah.
Lots of learning along the way in both aspects, and for that, experience is the greatest teacher, I think, and I don't know that I could have ever learned that any other way. So Cross Symphonic represents a moment in time for me, and a moment that I forgot where I was going with that.
That's okay. I like.
No. It represents a moment in time for me, and it represents a point in my career as a composer, and I think I will always look on that fondly, regardless of where I go from here.
That was good. That's a great answer. Like that's perfect. You did it fine. Like it took 2 tries, but Yeah,
that
was such an open-ended question. I knew that it was just really kind of bland, and but I'm glad you were able to condense it into something really nice at the end there. So I appreciate that.
No,
like that's an answer that could lead to like a whole nother interview. It's like such a psychological question.
Your listeners will be so tired of hearing my voice by now.
Never. I'll give them 4 knocks on their doors, right? So
no.
I just want to say it's been pleasure having you on here, to meet you for the first time digitally, Hey,
likewise.
Maybe one day I'll just bump into you and be like, hey, you that guy, huh? You're that guy who did the Chrono album or something. Some real jerk about it.
You would be surprised how many people still think that my album is called Chrono Symphonic, which is an album that a YouTuber did many years ago. It has no relation to me.
You're that guy. I knew it. I hate that guy. No, but so yeah, blessed to have you on here, man. I had a great time. Thanks for just taking the time out of your busy schedule to hang out with Niko. And
yeah, not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And I'm just glad that both of us had this opportunity to get to know each other, and then who knows where the future will take us, right? Not to sound like a
For sure.
not to sound like a fortune cookie or something, but this
Well, and
this was fun.
if not to plug myself a little bit, but if you and your fans enjoy my music and you have enjoyed Cross Symphonic, this is only the beginning. That's all I'm going to say right now. But this is only the beginning. I have plans. Some are closer than other. So
Yeah,
keep an eye out.
I'm excited, man. Like, you got me hooked for sure. So, if you want to get on my good side, just do a symphonic tribute to Final Fantasy IX, because that's my #1 favorite game of all time. All right, cool.
9 is a fantastic game, and it has a fantastic soundtrack. So I will neither confirm nor deny that I will do a 9 soundtrack at some point, but I will say I have done an arrangement of 9 in the past.
Sweet, you hear that, folks? Niko's double dipping. All right, and just real quick, I know you said at the beginning of the interview, but just a reminder, where can people find you?
For my music, the best place is Twitter. It's where I do the most self-advertising, and that's at John Paul Hayward. And then I also post pretty frequently when I have things to share on Facebook, and that is at John Paul Hayward Music on Facebook.
Awesome. And then if you guys want to do what I do when I listen to them, mainly, you can find them on Spotify, no problem. Just got to type in Cross Symphonic. And of course, I will do the work for you guys. I will post the links down below, so in case, I don't know, something happens, Spotify is hard to search through, because sometimes it is hard to find people's albums in Spotify.
Yeah.
Are you on Apple Music at all?
I am. So all of my releases should be on all major platforms: Apple Music, Spotify, what used to be Google Play, which is now YouTube Music.
Okay. Cool.
I believe I actually have them released on YouTube as well. Deezer.
Yes, you do have them on YouTube. I saw them. Good stuff.
Yeah. And so, it's out there. I also have Bandcamp, which is where the album released originally. And on Bandcamp, you can actually still buy a hard copy of the CD with some really fantastic album art by Rowie. And
nice. Cool.
You can buy the vinyl edition, and we still have a couple posters available, too, if anyone's interested in that.
Sweet. Sign me up. All right. Awesome, man. All right. Once again, thanks, John Paul Hayward, for your time, and we might do this again sometime. You never know, right?
Yeah, for sure. You never know what's coming down the pipeline.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. See you guys later. I've been Niko the Legend.